NFL draft this week. Travis Hunter is going to be a bust, and Tyler Warren is going to be best prospect in the draft.
Welcome back to Life in the Stands. We have Jake, Zach, and Kyle back on the podcast today. We're really excited to jump into some of the best NFL Combine performances in NFL history and also share some of our top prospects going into the 2025 NFL Draft. Remember to like and subscribe. Appreciate everyone following and listening. And with that, let's jump into our number one top 5 historical performance at the NFL Combine. We're going to start with Saquon Barkley at the 2018 Combine. So just for starters, he was a running back, but I want to talk about his bench press first because he did 29 reps at 225 pounds.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive because everybody talks about his squat, right? You always see, especially the running back squatting, and then the Saquon, Jalen Hurts squatting contest that's been going on since he joined the Eagles. But that's honestly not as impressive as the vertical because at least we got to see the vertical with the 180 hurdle earlier this year.
I mean, yeah, when you think about, people always talk about how bench press doesn't really matter for running backs, but when you think about what he's doing behind Jalen Hurts, pushing a 225-pound man, that's very applicable in that situation. So I think it was a ridiculous performance, one we're probably not going to see replicated anytime soon.
Not if the tush push gets banned.
That's true. That's true.
Right. And on top of all this, the man ran a 4.4 40-yard dash, which we also see in he had the most 60-plus yard runs in the NFL this year, or in history or whatever it was. There was some crazy number of 60-plus yard touchdown runs. So literally everything that he did in the Combine translated and has translated to what he's doing in the NFL, which is pretty cool. But let's jump into the next player here, which is a player that didn't do too many things at the Combine, but everyone knows is a freak of nature. And I feel like when you talk about NFL history, just in terms of people that came through that were just complete cyborgs for their position, you think about Megatron, you think about Calvin Johnson, right? And Calvin Johnson came in with measurements 6'5", 239, and he ran a 4.35 40-yard dash. Just ridiculous athleticism from a human of that size.
And 4.35 at that size, at that position, because he's not looked at as one of the speediest receivers ever. Right now, now we're looking at the Tyreek Hill, Xavier Worthies of the world in running, not Calvin Johnson. Nobody would have ever thought that.
Yeah, I mean, you combine that height and that speed, you can see why he was one of the best wide receivers when he was in the league. It's just disappointing that he didn't last as long as, because I think in future years we could have seen an even better Calvin Johnson.
Could you imagine a prime Calvin Johnson with the current Lions squad that's there right now?
Yeah.
Yucky. So third player on our list is actually another wide receiver that has a similar kind of performance in DK Metcalf. So slightly smaller frame at 6'3", 228, but ran a slightly faster 40-yard dash. Also got 27 reps of the bench press at 225. Just another physical freak. I'm surprised that he fell in the draft as much as he did.
Yeah, I think people almost overlook the physical attributes, and I don't think it always translates to the field, but I think it's definitely something where it should have benefited his draft stock, if anything. And I don't really know why he slid that far.
Oh, for sure. I mean, what GM looks at a guy like DK Metcalf and thinks I don't want that on my team. I don't know. It's ridiculous that he dropped that far, even based on this performance in the Combine.
I mean, not Pete Carroll, because Pete Carroll loved having DK Metcalf in his Combine interview. I'm sure you guys remember those videos of Pete Carroll immediately ripping his shirt off to match DK Metcalf. So, he went to the right place. And I'm excited to see what Pete Carroll does in the Raiders, as a little side note, because I think he's a good personality for that team's at. Moving on to our fourth player, it's actually going to be a Cowboys player, so this will make Jake happy. We're going to go with Byron Jones. So Byron Jones actually has the NFL Combine record for the broad jump at 12 feet 3 inches. I'll just stop there, even though he almost had a 45-inch vertical as well. Just supreme athleticism.
I'll say 44.5-inch vertical on top of the broad jump, and I think it's very important in this case. And he ran what, like a 4.36
Yeah, he ran the
40 as
four
well.
threes. Yeah, four threes.
Speed and the verticality is needed, especially when you're trying to cover ground as a corner. So you can see why it's one of the top performances.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about these wide receivers that have crazy jumps, crazy hops. Like, so it's important to be able to get up high, knock balls down, because otherwise you're just going to get mossed every single possession down the field. So,
And most corners are undersized, so you definitely need the physical attributes as a corner.
Right.
right.
Right. I think it also speaks to something like having that kind of power and that kind of explosion is like it translates to like strength as well. So if he's having to, take on a block, or if he's having to make a tackle in space against a bigger back or a bigger tight end, like even if he doesn't have the biggest frame, the strength is there, like solid, if you're able to produce that much power. So moving on to our last player, I feel like this is someone that almost like doesn't, like people don't know that he had such a good combine performance, but he has one of the fastest 40 times for a tight end ever, which is Vernon Davis. So we just talked about how crazy it is that Byron Jones did all the things he did and he ran the 4.3s. Vernon Davis is a tight end and ran in the 4.3s.
Yeah, his vertical jump was 42 inches as well. For such a big guy, that's very impressive, to be honest with you. And then on top of that, his strength in the bench press with 33 reps at 225. Yeah. I also think he's one of the most underappreciated tight ends in the league as well. And he had a very successful career. And he was one of the guys that made those physical numbers matter on the field.
Yeah, when I first read this list, I was very surprised by that, because when I picture Vernon Davis, I always think of big burly tight end guy who's not really gonna run a fast 40 and not really a guy who's gonna, I mean, strength wise, yes, but he just doesn't strike me as someone who's gonna be that kind of tight end.
Yeah, almost like a mauler. Like a rumbling, bumbling, takes three people to get him to the ground kind of tight end. So just not what I pictured in my head, and maybe we're showing our age by saying that. But
True.
That, those are some of the top, historical NFL Combine performances that are out there. Just some absolute freaks of nature, and these are the times where athletic performances did actually translate well to the NFL football field, because sometimes, like Jake mentioned, that doesn't always happen. So with that, let's jump into some of our current top prospects going into the 2025 NFL Draft. We did have 5 top prospects. In full transparency, Abdul Carter was on that list. The injury happened, and he's still going to be a fantastic prospect, but we wanted room for another player yet because Kyle needed to talk about Tyler Warren. So I'm going to let Jake talk about why maybe Abdul Carter should have stayed on the list, even with his injury, and then I'm going to let Kyle talk about why Tyler Warren deserved to take his spot.
So I don't think people should press the panic button, first of all, on Carter. A stress reaction is on the way to a stress fracture, which is more commonly known. I think it's better off he takes those 8 weeks they were talking about to heal rather than surgery. Surgery can kind of mess up your whole body mechanics. So I don't want to have him go through surgery at such a young age and at the start of his career. I think that can kind of hamper some things there. But I don't think if he takes the 8 weeks to heal, I don't think it'll impact him at all. And I don't even know if it's actually that important when the season doesn't start for a long time from now. He has the time to recover. He has the time to be ready for training camp. I don't even think he should be involved with the combine. I think he's shown enough on the field.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think he's going to definitely be a prospect that teams are going to want no matter the health, because he will come back healthy. It's not like this is a detrimental thing to his career. So for sure. But I also think that Tyler Warren is going to be much better of a prospect, because when you see his mismatch ability, his ability to play anywhere, you can put him in the slot and he can create mismatches in coverage. Teams are going to look at that and they're going to want a tight end that can do that. Especially with how the league is leaning more towards pass catching tight ends now. I think Tyler Warren is going to be part of the upcoming class that is going to be a generational talent.
The thing about Tyler Warren is he does have a lot of flexibility in the position he plays, and he's a great blocker too. I think that's one aspect of his game that, before you really dig into his film and you're just watching the games, obviously the plays pop out when he has 17 catches against USC or whatever it is. Like, obviously you're looking at that part, but if you really dig into the film and start to watch it too, as a lot of like NFL draft evaluators have started to do, he is a good blocker. Like, he's definitely a serviceable blocker. And if you're going to play that many positions, you got to be smart. So it feels like those are things that translate to the NFL, but I still feel like Tyler Warren could have the floor of like a Taysom Hill. And if that's your floor, then like, is it worth a top 5 or 10 pick? Like, top 20, top 25 to the right situation for sure, but maybe like top 5, top 10 prospect, it's tough in a position like that.
I was gonna say, I think he's a more skilled Taysom Hill. So yeah. I'm glad you said it was his floor.
Well, let me walk back even further. Do you think the Atlanta Falcons are happy with their selection of Kyle Pitts at number 4? Have they gotten their value out of that number 4 overall pick at tight end?
As a big fantasy football guy, I hate Kyle Pitts. It's not even his fault. It's mainly coaching, but also he just never shows up, man. And it's such a waste.
But also Kyle Pitts. Well, now that we've talked about the 2 Penn State guys, let's move on to a Michigan guy. Let's jump over to Mason Graham. We also think he's going to be a top prospect. There's always a couple D linemen that are near the top of draft boards.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about him other than I think he's overshadowed by Abdul Carter as a D end in the draft. I think Mason Graham's just as good and plays championship football too. He was on that championship team 2 years ago. He kind of has that DNA going into the league, and I think that's important. At least having playoff experience in college football leading into the league, I think, is important. And I think he'll make an instant impact.
Yeah, I mean, for a guy who is such a good run stopper, I think it's important, especially how we're seeing running backs kind of have a resurgence. I think teams are going to look at that and see a guy who's a really good run stopper and say, like, listen, this is a priority for us.
Yeah, a little bit of a different player than Abdul Carter, but I would agree just as impactful as a player. Very similar in that way. So let's jump over to the only QB on our list, which is going to be Cam Ward. We chose Cam Ward above any other QB coming out of this class. In general, I still think this is a pretty weak QB class, though.
A weak QB class, but I think it's just him, and that's why it's weak. He's the only person that I think can make an instant impact on a team, and he's very skilled. I compare him more to what Daniels did this year for the Commanders. I think he can jump into a team like that, which what scares me, obviously I'm a Cowboys fan, you see all the crap in the background, right? Our division's going to be stacked, and I'm scared for it if Cam Ward goes to the Giants.
I don't know if he has that immediate of an impact just because the Giants literally have nobody else. So
right.
I think he could be a good player, but it's going to take a while I don't think it's going to be like a Jaden Daniels type situation, in my opinion.
It's at the minimum a good start in a rebuild when you pair him with Neighbors.
True.
Yeah. Well, and let me ask you this, Kyle. If Cam Ward ends up on the Giants, who has the worst QB in the division?
Eagles.
Oh, okay.
System quarterback.
Yeah. So I mean, if Jalen Hurts is a worse quarterback than Dak Prescott.
Dak was in the MVP running before he got injured 2 years ago. So that's all I'm saying.
Wow.
Actually, I can't say that. I have Benner on here. Never mind. I take that back. That just hurt me to say. I can't say that.
Yeah, you jumped to that really quickly, and I was surprised because I thought I was giving you just an alley-oop to dunk on the Cowboys, but I guess not. So moving on from the quarterback discussion, though, we're going to list the last 2 players, and I left them last because I feel like their fates are always going to be kind of intertwined because of what happened with the Heisman, and their pro careers are going to be looked at because of the positions they play too. They're always going to be comparisons, and it's always going to be impossible to compare them, which is going to make people do it even more. So Ashton Jeanty and Travis Hunter. Obviously, Travis Hunter won the Heisman. Ashton Jeanty a very close second, as he should have been, possibly even should have won it. Both these guys, I think, are going to have really productive NFL careers, but they're always going to be, that storyline's always going to be linked because of the kind of season Ashton Jeanty had with him not winning the Heisman.
Yeah, but I think Jeanty doesn't have as high of a ceiling as Travis Hunter has because Travis Hunter can play both sides of the ball. Once they figure out what position they want to play him at, and I think he'll go to the Titans, by the way. Whenever they figure out what position they want to play him at, because it's not maintainable to play both, I think he'll evolve and actually develop into a star at that position rather than taking time on both and possibly injuring himself. Genty, I still think has a chance to be a great player. I compare him to a Mark Ingram. Productive career, but not like the biggest name in the league. But I'll take a Mark Ingram any day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a great comparison, I think. I just personally do not believe in Travis Hunter. I don't think anything he's going to do is going to translate over to the NFL scene. I think he's a above average corner in college, but that doesn't translate to the NFL. I think that's a below average corner in the NFL. And wide receiver wise, I haven't seen stuff that I love from him. So I think if a team does try to draft him super early, they're going to be wasting a pick, personally. But
if you looked at him as just a receiver in the draft, Kyle, what rank receiver would you put him at?
Probably somewhere around the 6 to 7 range. So
Okay.
I think he's going way too high for. I mean, if you look at McMillan, he's been much better. I think he is a very underlooked option in this draft, and I think people are gonna eventually see that once they get to the league.
Tetaroa McMillan and Travis Hunter actually matched up with each other at one point during the season, and McMillan kind of won that matchup with Travis Hunter guarding him with Hunter playing corner. So it will be really interesting to see how their careers pan out. I like the Mark Ingram comparison as well. The question always remains, kind of like I asked with the Tyler Warren tight end pick, like, where do you feel comfortable drafting a Mark Ingram at? I've seen mocks where the Steelers are drafting him at 21st overall. Are you comfortable if you know you're getting a Mark Ingram floor? Are you comfortable taking that at 21 overall? Like, is that good enough value? Like, I don't know.
And here's something going into the draft that I think people need to keep an eye on, and it's what Adam Schefter said on the Pat McAfee show. Picks 10 through 35, there is no drop-off in talent. It's all leveled out. It's all level with each other. So the same player at 10 is going to be the same value player at 35. So the top 10 is very important, which teams trade up. And then he said there's a lot of value in the 3rd through 5th round, so we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Great insights there from Adam Schefter. Thanks, Shefty, for a spot on the Life in the Stands podcast. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe. Let us know which NFL prospects going into the 2025 NFL Draft you think are the most promising, and we'll see you on the next episode.